Welcome, Eagles, to another episode of Trad Cat Night Radio. I am Eric Ajewski, founder and owner of Trad Cat Night, the most viewed and followed traditional Catholic apostolate worldwide. This is also home to the New Crusade. Ladies and gentlemen, I have with me a very special guest today, Mr. Steve Olson. Now, Steve is the founding member of the WSO Wormwood System Observations YouTube channel. It has flourished within 6 months to 35,000 subscribers. Steve was a business IT executive prior to this particular ministry, working with Xerox, Miller Brewing Company, and a variety of other Forbes 500 businesses. He's a veteran of the United States Air Force, and he worked with some very high clearances, to say the least. So today we're talking about Planet X. We're talking about Earth changes. This is a very dear topic to us, not only as traditional Catholics, but we have a wide following, of course, mainly who are not Catholics, who are following along, and they're seeing the same things. And it's not only is there scientific data there to prove that, as we've had on Gil Broussard and Marshall Masters and others, people should just be able to see this with their own eyes now. As a matter of fact, this morning, Steve, I posted Hawkeye Davis, who does a pretty good job of covering the Earth change. I think his YouTube channel is something like 70,000 subscribers, and some very telling video there from the past month, and I posted it all over social media, and I had people who had never heard of Planet X before give the feedback of, "Oh boy, we're in big trouble." That was their immediate reaction. And so, yeah, I mean, this thing is inbound and it's causing all kinds of chaos already. And so I'm going to hand it over to Steve so he can talk a little bit more about his background, how he got involved with Planet X, the research involved, and then, as always, we're just going to kind of just walk through this like a conversation. And I'm really looking forward to hear what Mr. Olson has to say. So, Steve.
Thank you for well. First of all, thank you for having me on the show, Eric. I really appreciate it. I'm honored to be here. So, just to answer your question, right? Planet X Nibiru was the furthest thing from my mind, possibly the furthest thing from my mind, not more than a year and a half ago. If somebody would have came up to me and said, "Steve, there's a planetary system, a solar system heading towards our solar system, and that it's going to start causing a lot of Earth changes," I would have called the Mendota Mental Health Institution to ask for the people to come get them.
Yeah.
So Mendota is our local psychiatric hospital, by the way. That's why I use the euphemism. Anyway, so what happened was that changed it was actually, it's really funny. I made a commitment to my son, my youngest son, who's now 23. In that same time period, I said, you know what? I'm going to get off the mainstream media. I am going to, for 6 months, not watch TV, not watch ABC, NBC, not watch, you know what I mean? Just stay away from mainstream for a little while, right? Because he was being really critical of me, not opening my mind to, to the kind of the broader spectrum of alternative news and things like that. So sure, I'll keep an open mind. I went on, I started to listen to people like Joe Rogan, really enjoyed all kinds of reporting and news that I was really enjoying. And I stumbled across this thing, Nibiru, right? Nibiru, what is that? So I start looking around, and I'm very skeptical on the internet, right? And I pick up a couple of authors. One guy was Bob Fletcher. Another one was Marshall Masters, who, by the way, now is my friend. And many others that have written on the topic. And I saw all that stuff from 2012 and everything. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go outside and see if I can get a picture of it myself, right? So I got some welding glasses and I went outside. And sure enough, I see this bright second dot next to the sun. I freak out. I drive an hour away to go to be at a friend of mine who I know to be a very good astronomer. And I actually sent a copy of it to Bob Fletcher and freaked. And they all came back to me and said, "No, Steve, that's just a lens flare. Even though we believe that, Planet X is inbound, we don't think that you got a visual of it yet." So I said, "Oh, okay." So I put it away and I thought, "Wow, you crazy boy." And I went back to my job. Lo and behold, though, about, I don't know, 7-8 months ago, I watched everything I could. I looked at everything I could on Nibiru, but then all of a sudden I saw a picture that was convincing. A picture that was actually taken from one of the all sky cameras network around the world. And I went right to it. It was one in Australia. and Irkutsk or something like that, Australia, out in the outback, and it showed a almost perfect straight-on picture of a blue object with a red ring around it. I'm like, well, that doesn't really look right. So I started thinking about it. I said, you know what? I'm going to go look at. I'm going to see if there's anything in the South Pole that you can look at, because it seems to me that it's further south. So I should look at a further southern camera. Lo and behold, I find the Australian South Pole expedition camera. I pull it up, and I immediately see a huge triangle in the sky, clearly up in the atmosphere, a huge cloud triangle, a huge red cloud ring in the middle of the sky, and clearly some kind of a star or object in the middle of it. I sat there for maybe an hour where I couldn't speak. And then my wife came in. She goes, "What's wrong?" I said, I just confirmed the existence of this star system. I think I actually see the star. And so that one thing led to another, and I just decided to put a couple of my videos up on the YouTube channel. And I'm also a very spiritual person, having been raised Catholic. I was taught confirmed in the Catholic Church. My wife and I were married in the Catholic Church, so we're very, very familiar with the Catholic religion. And we know that these events were predicted, and because of our teachings in the Catholic Church. But the second thing that I remembered from my upbringing was we talked a lot about Fatima when I was growing up, and we talked a lot about Medjugorje and these places where the girls were seeing, the apparitions of Mary and getting prophetical statements.
Yeah,
I think you're very familiar with this, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of them, Steve. There's Fatima. There was Our Lady of Akita, which very accurately describes this kill shot coming in, the CME blast, which is going to burn about a third of the earth. She said it was in 1973 in Japan. She said those who survive this fire from the sky are going to envy the dead. I mean, and that it ties in with Revelations for those who are not Catholic who want to get a more general scriptural. I believe it's Revelation 8:7. I could be wrong, but it talks about this fire coming down, mingled with blood and hail, and that's what it's going to be. This kill shot. But yeah, it's been prophesied at La Salette too that the seasons would change. There'd be famines. I mean, Our Lady's been warning us of this planetary system honestly for quite some time.
Well, the thing that you find out when you go to look at the third prophecy of Fatima, which again I know you're familiar with, and what leaks that we have been able to hear, or the people that have testified of what's in it, it really, to me, just like you just said, Eric, it's just basically a replay of Revelation, really, is what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
And so any serious Christian that have studied the scriptures and John's Revelation and other books like that, you knew something like this was going to happen, but nobody ever thinks it's going to be in their lifetime.
Exactly.
And that's the thing that I find having to deal with this is the people that are coming around to this. I just want you and your listeners to know, and the people that have been rushing to me are people that are just learning about it and coming awake to it. And I would have to say a good percentage of them, and I'm not trying to disparage anybody, but I'm just saying that doctors, lawyers, physicists, astronomers, government, my subscriber base and the people that correspond with me, this network that built overnight, Eric, these are credible people that I'm dealing with right now. These are not, the typical tinfoil hat kind of people that you think of, right?
Absolutely.
Well, and lo and behold, as I open up, then I start to learn about people like you, Eric, and Marshall Masters, and so basically I've kind of spread out in it. And I think what makes us unique at WSO, and the reason why people like the approach that we're taking right now is, number one, we try to keep a very economical point of view. So nobody gets rejected based on their religious beliefs, but I don't make any bones that I'm a Christian. And I will talk about Christianity all I want to on my station, and people know that. So I said, but everybody is welcome. I don't care if you're a Hindu, Muslim, whatever you are welcome to come here and be with us, right? And what happens is I basically ask my audience to send me from all over the world their best shots, things that they've seen. And if you think about it, 35,000 times 2 is probably my more likely regular viewership, maybe up to 100,000. And if you think about that, they're all over the world. So I am getting the best photography because I'm getting people's shots from their own cameras in their backyards as opposed to relying on just a webcam. You know what I mean?
Sure.
The second thing is that that's working really well is the fact that it's a discussion in the learning process. None of us claim to know, and especially me, hopefully, and my core people that I'm with, we all admit that we don't know. We barely know anything, and we're at the mercy of the Father. I mean, there's no Jesus and the Father. There's no other place where knowledge really, you're going to get the full knowledge. So we try to stay as humble as we possibly can and open-minded as we can. That hurts me a little bit sometimes too, because we have to consider theories that may not be in the mainstream. But on the other hand, the good stuff that we get in this open-minded approach to it is that I think we're starting to lock down now on what it is, where it is, and not, and I'm reluctant to talk about when it is. Now I'm starting to get why, Pope Francis maybe went into hermitage when he found out about it. You know what I mean? I have a feeling that this event had something to do with Benedict's, not Francis, I'm sorry, but Benedict's retirement,
Yeah.
I think that he was traumatized by it.
Yeah, there's no doubt that we cover this as traditional Catholics. There's no doubt there's been an infiltration of the Catholic Church, but it's critical for our non-Catholic audience to know that because of this infiltration, the real third secret is not being revealed, and part of that is the passing of Planet X. Now, of course, it doesn't actually say Planet X, but it's just inferred with all these chastisements coming in. Millions dying over the course of seconds, basically, was one of the leaks coming from one of those who read it. Then, of course, I'm sure you're familiar with Father Malachi Martin, who was on Art Bell, Coast to Coast.
Yep.
And he always dropped little tidbits. He always said the Vatican was watching it in Italy. Then, of course, you have Project Wormwood out in Australia, an observatory watching that. I believe that's government funded. Then you got the observatory out there in Mount Graham in Arizona called Lucifer. And, it ties in with this whole New World Order and the Luciferians trying to usher in their new age. And Planet X is just as key to them as it is to us. It's going to be their sign to kickstart their new age, which is kind of frightening, considering you and I both probably agree that this thing is more imminent. So here we are on the verge of, economic collapse, worldwide revolutions, anarchy everywhere, World War III, Russia buildup. We see this recently. And now we got Planet X passing. So talk about apocalyptic events that were on the horizon of. And again, it's not just Catholics who see it. It's everyone, as you said, who really maybe not even have a religion.
Right. And like while I was raised Catholic, traditional Catholic like you, and I would have, and again, a lot of people don't understand this Jesuit takeover the church, right? I mean, that is significant stuff, right? And you probably talk about it all the time. And I was always taught when being raised to be afraid of Jesuits. I don't know about you.
Well, the Jesuit order, it started out as a good and holy noble order from St. Ignatius of Loyola. So we have to be careful of the Protestantism that's behind that. There's a little disinformation on that, just as you'll find disinformation on Planet X. Now, the Jesuit order is the most infected with the New Age teachings, such as Teilhard, to name a few. But, they're highly liberal. They often support, homosexuals and homosexuality. So it was no surprise when we saw, again, from our perspective, I don't hold Francis as the true pope for our listeners. We believe he is a true anti-pope, an imposter, and he's a Jesuit, so it was no surprise to see him come to the forefront. And what is he doing? Trying to usher in these aliens. He said he would baptize aliens and this and that. I mean, it's just, there's a lot to this. And then the environmentalism piece, which I'm sure you're aware of, the whole climate change nonsense, which they try to basically blame on us when it's this thing coming in. It's Planet X coming in.
Oh, that's so like a Luciferian, though, to cause a problem and then blame the victim. That is so like Lucifer.
Exactly.
And so we shouldn't be surprised when that happens. But yeah, and that was the other thing that really woke me up was when I figured out that the global climate change that was happening wasn't because of CO2, right? And I started to understand that it was more about Earth changes and planetary changes. Well, okay, so apocalypse. I really do think that we're on the eve of it, man. I mean, like even today, I'm seeing a deluge of people saying it is now visible by naked eye, and I haven't seen that before. I'm starting to see the photographs just today start to roll in. I don't think the timing of the Britain exit is an accident. I don't think any of it's an accident, Eric.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you, in my research, it seems quite clear that obviously these Luciferians know who have taken over the Vatican, the world governments. I mean, take a look at all the puppets who are running, the various countries, and it becomes quite obvious who's running the show. But they know essentially the timing. I think they've been off, just as Father Martin was off a little bit in his timing. Maybe they were a little bit off with that whole propaganda with the 2012 movie, but I mean, this thing is imminent now. We can see it visibly with our own eyes, but then also tangibly, scientifically, with the rise in the magnitude of the earthquakes or birth pangs, the sinkholes, and all of that. My question to you is this, though, talking about mainstream, what do you take of this whole Planet 9 in the mainstream? Would you be along the same lines of what Marshall Masters, Gil Broussard, and I would say that that's just disinformation? They're saying it's like beyond Neptune or something like that. Like, now the mainstream is actually admitting there's something out there, but I mean, they're saying it's like so out there that don't even worry about it.
Oh, right. Absolutely. I'm in total agreement with Marshall, you and Gil and everybody like that, because see, the misinformation remember, when you see misinformation happening from the government perspective or from any kind of operations perspective, CIA operations perspective, whatever, they're always trying to get you to look at the wrong thing. That's what they do. So that the obvious thing that's right in your face can't be seen. That's how it works.
Yeah.
Okay? So why isn't it obvious to every astronomer on this Earth that the North Star moved a declination of 4 to 5 degrees east in the sky? Why is it that I'm 17 degrees too far north with my sunsets and sunrises in the summer solstice? Why is that, Eric? And these are things that every human being on the Earth that has any basic modicum of education can look up in the sky if you know where the North Star is supposed to be and where it is now. And that's the whole star field, by the way, that moved. And the second thing is you can observe yourself that the sun is too far north. That's what's been waking a lot of people up lately, is that people are going, I went to your channel because I saw that the sun was too far north and I had to find out why.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're on our side right now. People don't know that, but we're laying on our side, basically, okay? And things are happening. It just almost seems like an exponential curve starting to take place, Eric. And I'm not a date setter at all, but I'm not feeling really good right now. Let's just say it that way.
Yeah. I've been on record too. A lot of people are asking me because they want to move and stuff. And we've been on record. I wanted to get your take on this. I mean, we've been saying now using some approved Catholic sources of what Our Lady has said concerning these times. Get off coastlines, get out of major cities due to, the economic collapse, martial law coming. What's basically your take, your analysis? What are you telling your people in terms of areas to avoid? And again, I'm not trying to fearmonger, but I think to a certain degree, preparation has to be taken seriously. I know there's some out there who will just fly by, okay, well, if it happens, it happens. But I look at scripture, I see in the Old Testament, I see Noah was a prepper. He knew the flood was coming. We see Joseph, right? He knew the 7-year famine was coming, so he stored 7 years of grain. So I think preparation is prudent. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. And even if you disregard everything we're talking about, just natural disasters, tornadoes, floods, earthquakes, hurricanes, every family in America should be ready to live on their own for 3 months with no outside assistance. That should be your goal. In other words, food, water, supplies, things like that, medicines, foods for your animals, whatever you need. But anyway, the first question you have to ask yourself when you run into this phenomenon is and it sinks in, right? It's like, okay, it's real, man. It's happening. Okay, now what am I going to do? The first question you have to ask is, are you going to stay in place or are you going to bug out?
Yeah.
That's the first question you have to ask yourself. Let's get honest and logical about it, right? And if you're on a coast, and I'll only say it from what I would do if I were you. I'm not giving any advice. It's just what I would do.
Sure.
Okay. What I would do if I was on the coast is I would get the hell off the coast. Excuse my language.
Sure.
Okay. If I was living near a major fault line, I'd move away from it. If I was in a low-lying, flood-prone area of the United States, I'd get to higher ground. And those are the three things that I already did. So I'm living on a very stable piece of earth. at an elevation of 1,200 feet, which I think is barely enough. I think it's going to be somewhere between 600 and 800 feet sea level rise. If you're listening to people like John Moore and people that have talked to the Navy directly and gotten information from the officers there.
Yeah. We're hoping to get him on. As a matter of fact, I was just looking at my emails popping up, and he just accepted an invite as we're talking. So I know you had talked to him previously, and I was listening to him today. Wow, he's got some really great insights.
He does, but like a lot of the guys that were, studying this earlier than maybe some of the folks that just recently woke up, like me and others, John has been knowing about this since 2000. So this guy has been walking around with this for 16 years. It would have destroyed me. That's why the Holy Spirit didn't let me know about it until a year ago. But can you imagine walking around, watching everybody just go about their business, watching all of these things being engineered and knowing what was happening? I really give him a lot of empathy, I guess is what I'd say.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't want to say frustrating. It's just that, for people who will label us as nut jobs and tinfoil hat people. I mean, listen, I grew up on the Jersey Shore. I've been warning people for a while. I mean, that's probably going to be like the next Atlantis. I mean, you don't want to be, in California. You don't want to be in areas coming from a spiritual standpoint where where sodomy is prevalent. I mean, take a look. If you're a God, you take a look down at the world. What are the cities that are the most liberal? And they're on coastlines, right? Seattle, Los Angeles, the Boston area, also, the tri-state area. I mean, it's just, people have to start looking at it from a different perspective. I know most people aren't necessarily religious who are coming to our channels, but it's something to consider. Now, my question...
Again, I make no bones about this. Here's the first thing you should do. You should get back in touch with the Creator. That's what you need to do. Now. Because, the honest truth is, Eric, only a very few are going to physically do anything about this. That's my final word on it. I'm saying maybe 1% of the people, 2%, 5% of the people that find out about it are actually going to do something physically about it. So at WSO, what we did is we set up an international group structure, regional group structure, where we have leaders in local areas, and they've started little groups, and so that people that, if they want to find out how to get away from these areas or to come up with a plan or whatever, they can certainly come to my channel and go look and see where the leader is in their area and contact them. So we're not sitting on our hands and waiting for this to happen, Eric. That's not the way God made me. Okay?
Yeah.
So I'm going to do everything I can to help. But at the other hand, what I don't want to hear about is what a lot of people will criticize us when we say this is, well, what are you doing to the people that have schizophrenia or maybe have problems or, those kinds of things? You're going to terrify these people. But look, that is not any of our intent.
Sure.
We're laying out what is a realistic scientific situation going on in our local cosmos. Okay? That's all. And it's becoming more and more convincing every day. It's leaking out every day. We've got hard scientific points of reference, and it's imminent, Eric. So the question is, are you going to just sit in place, or are you going to bug out? That's the first question you have to ask.
Yeah. Once again, I have with me Mr. Steve Wilson, who runs WSO. I will put all of his information in the description box, his YouTube channel, his Facebook page, his bio. Make sure you get to his information. Again, he specifically is tracking and taking, gathering pictures from all over the world. People who have perhaps some religious affiliation, some who are not, who are all kind of seeing the same thing that we're seeing. And so my next question to you is, what's the latest rumblings from the Steve Olson camp, WSO? Any inside tips, sources, latest research on Planet X? I was contacted, Steve, about 4 months or so ago by a high-ranking military man who left. He retired. He wanted nothing to do with Obama anymore. And he said, listen, yeah, the military does know about this. I moved my family off the coastline, and now he's somewhere, I forget where, like way out west, and he's prepared. The only thing I would recommend is pay attention to Yellowstone. I don't know what your prognosis is on Yellowstone. That doesn't look too promising, or that other super volcano that's in eastern California. Maybe you could talk about that too.
Yeah, well, you've got two things going on right now that I think you got to keep an eye on, and you talk about insider information. So my first thing is very upsetting to me. I'm reluctant to even share it. one of my inside sources is talking about that the currency war reset is imminent now, right? So
Okay.
and it does relate to Nibiru and Wormwood, guys, and I'll tell you in a second, okay? So it's going to be an escalation of events. First, there'll be currency problems. Then there's going to be bank problems. Then there's going to be pay our bill problems. Then there's going to be a war. And then there's going to be, and it will happen very quickly. It's not like this is going to develop over 6 months or 8 months. This will happen like in a matter of weeks.
I agree.
This is my opinion only. Okay. So the point that the reason why I'm feeling a little bit of unsettled, not scared. I'm not afraid of what's happening, Eric.
Sure, yeah.
But I do feel like the urgency is starting to happen, because this almost feels like the trigger event, that like the one thing you'll be able to point back to. Remember when Britain left the EU and everything went to heck? That's what I think is going to happen.
No, I totally agree with you. We've been saying that now for a while, and it totally falls in line with what Marie Julie said, a prominent Catholic mystic. Basically, the synopsis is, it's not going to develop over a year or two. It's going to be like dominoes. When you hit that first domino, you know how everything just happens really fast. Boom, 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 boom. And I think most people who study Planet X say the same thing, and who are aware of, I'll just say, general prophecy. It's, all of these events aren't going to happen over a year's span. It's probably going to happen within a matter of months. And I mean everything between economic collapse, worldwide revolutions, anarchy, World War III, and then the immediate planet, the path of Planet X. So that's interesting. Your latest insight.
I think they're going to go for the worst possible taste in everybody's mouth right prior to the event of the current world system. Listen to me, okay? And the reason I feel a grave warning coming through me right now. So when that happens, when you see, you're going to see them get worse, not better. The governments of the world will get worse. They'll get more nationalistic. They'll look like freaking Nazis, okay, overnight, all right? And we're already seeing this happen in France, Germany, England. We're seeing it in the United States in spades. So already we're starting to see this nationalism, which is really just a way to prelude to war, right? When you they're going to make us taste so bad that once Nibiru passes and the whole, everybody's trying to recover and get back on their feet again, it will be prime territory for the Antichrist, the son of perdition, to say, I've got all the answers and I've got help from the Anunnaki.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, we've been warning about that now for a while. It's going to be, in my opinion, this character Maitreya, who the UN will purport, Israel as well. He'll come onto the scene, and they're trying to construct this one world socialist republic. I've been warning people to pay attention to this term being thrown around called sharing, right? Legitimate redistribution of wealth. Socialism. It's a one world socialist republic that they're trying to form, which, by the way, the Catholic Church warned before the Second Vatican Council.
Well, there's nothing wrong with true socialism or true communism. If you really study what's going on in terms of the philosophy it would depend on having a Holy Spirit to help you with changing human nature for it to work, though. That's the problem with central control and planning. You'll always end up with evil because power becomes too concentrated, and we saw it in China, and we saw it in the Soviet Union, so we've already tried it, okay? It doesn't work because human beings can't handle it.
Tell me about your research into how the world governments are preparing themselves. I'm sure you've had and talked to Bob Fletcher, as I have. He was one of the main researchers behind that I first studied and looked into. But it seems to me that they're preparing and getting ready to go underground and leave us on top of the surface.
Yeah.
And then also
that's
how
another harbinger, right? All the orders for food, ammunition, MREs, all the construction in the Soviet Union, the construction in China, I understand as well. All of it has slowed down almost. It's almost over with now. It's almost done. You get the feeling that the project is completed, that they're ready. And I'm sorry to tell this to you guys. I really am. But this is what's happening, okay? Their orders are filled. There's no more big orders. They're stocked. They're ready. Now, what does that mean, Eric? They've been ready since October of 2015. That's what my sources are telling me.
Yeah, I agree. We're in the final stages here. It's, again, we don't want to fearmonger. We want everyone. Nope. This is realistic. One of the things we fly by here, part of the expression, is to have the wings of an eagle, faith and hope, right? For us traditional Catholics, we have this message at Fatima where she said, in the end, the Immaculate Heart will triumph. Her heel will squash the New World Order, and through Russia, which is kind of interesting that Russia becomes more and more conservative, and heaven basically said through the Blessed Virgin Mary that they were pivotal in restoring Christendom back in the world. And take a look, they're the ones really only resisting the New World Order. And who knows, once Putin will have enough and he'll just start letting the missiles fly and start going nuts on U.S., NATO, and so that'll
well, that's my big concern, right? I mean, from a geopolitical perspective, we know that, right? Hey, guys, you got to know your history, man. Russia was the Eastern Orthodox in the Catholic Church state in Rome, and just understand that there's been a divide there that's now starting to melt down a little bit. But the Orthodox Christians were just as territorial as the papal Christians were, okay? And they lost Constantinople back in whatever year it was, Eric. If you look in St. Petersburg on some of the government buildings and stuff, you'll see that the crescent is under the cross in these things. The Orthodox Russian religion has never forgotten the loss of Constantinople. Trust me on that. They want it back.
Yeah, and that ties in with prophecy, what Our Lady
said. It
said.
does. Russia's going to make a play for it at some point. They just conscripted 500,000, another 500,000. They're building up that northern border. And the only thing between Syria and Russia is Turkey.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and you've got this huge spiritual religious part that the Western media never talks about, right? Which is even Putin as a child was taught that this was a great offense to the Orthodox faith. You know what I mean? That the loss of Constantinople and that tip of the spear that they had with the Muslim faith during the war, the Great Crusade Wars and things like that of the Dark Ages and so forth. Russia was right on the tip of that all the time.
Yeah.
People don't know their history, man. It really, you'd be fascinated. They still sting from that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Alternative news media is reporting. I had on Dr. E. Michael Jones the other day, who also agreed with this too, that it's not just fabrication, but we're actually now placed on DEFCON 3. We had War Monitor, which is a highly credible website, saying that our military is basically nuke ready at this point. So it's positioning, people getting ready. I'm not saying it's going to happen in a couple of weeks. But there's no doubt we're heading to a point where after this economic collapse, it's just going to be, I've said that people will be going to sleep at night wondering if, a button will be pushed wherever you are in the world, not just here in the West or over there in Russia or wherever you're at. I mean, it's going to get to that point where it's going to be frightful. I mean, forget about Planet X just for a second. We're talking geopolitics. I mean, Planet X, politics. I mean, Planet X that's going to come through will be even far worse, in my opinion, than World War III. It'll take more lives, but we got to put all the pieces of the puzzle here, and that's what we're talking today with Steve Olson. Now, tell me a little bit about this. We're talking Earth changes, and what's your take on the whole sinkhole phenomena? I was watching Hawkeye Davis's channel today, and again going through all the video footage. And do you think it's going to get as bad as that movie 2012, where you just literally see coastlines disintegrating? I mean, will California just sink like a cork?
Yeah,
I agree with you.
Yeah, it's just good. I mean, it's like, and it's not like we just learned this, you guys. I mean, ever since we've had geology and seismology and all these different skills, they have been measuring the San Andreas, okay? We've been looking at this thing for a long time, a relatively long time for the age of America, anyway, right? No secret, San Andreas Fault someday is going to pop. Someday the Cascadia Fault Zone is going to pop, and we've always known it. So now, what would it take for something like that to really like cork off? Regular tectonic plate movement? Maybe over time it would do that. But when you've got a catalyst coming into your area that's electromagnetic and or gravitationally charged situation, and the Earth is getting pulled and pushed and pulled and pushed, and that, think of it as like a rubber egg getting just like, it's like it's being molded by these forces, and things have to give at that point, and that's why you have these sinkholes and everything, because the Earth is opening up all these caverns and all these spaces, because it's actually being forced to expand.
Great point. Yeah, and that ties in with prophecy. I did a whole hour show on Blessed Sister Aiello, who got warnings from the Blessed Virgin Mary back in the 50s. And she said not only were these sinkholes going to happen, listen to this, she said whole cities would be swallowed up, whole countries would be swallowed up. So that's why I say that when people look at me like I have three heads, and I say, hey, listen, I reference an approved source from a Catholic Church point of view, of course, for my non-Catholic listeners out there. And then also, we know even from Scripture, from Revelations, the earth will sway and wobble. And this ties in with the 3 days of darkness, where essentially Marie-Julie Jeheni said, another approved Catholic mystic, that during these 3 days of darkness, which is referenced in the Old Testament, you could talk a little bit about this after I'm done, but how during that 3 days, it's basically going to be like a 9.0, 10.0 earthquake for those 3 days straight. I mean, we're just going to be locked in like a magnet and just shake.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm getting right now. In terms of my study of prophecy, which I take just as serious as the scientific data, really there's no delineation between prophecy and science to me. So, yeah, I know that's going to probably lose me a lot of my scientific friends, but I'm looking at science right now, and this is what I wanted to share with you. We have seen one of the biggest magnetic field jumps off of the IRF-SE. This is the Swedish. By the way, the Swedes let us see the real data on the North Pole, and I'll give you the link. It's www.irf.se. It's the one site that you don't get censorship on with space data. And it showed a delineation of at least 25%, not delineation, but a movement of the northern pole of 25% jump back. And this was on the 23rd of June, yesterday.
Wow.
And I'm looking at the data. We're talking about and agreeing on prophecy. It's really not fear mongering anymore. It's warning. It's not fear porn. It's warning. It's a warning. I'm a watchman. I'm not a fear porn guy. I never wanted to do this, Eric. This isn't the path I chose for myself, okay? Yeah. So when I get slapped in and the Holy Spirit has a lot of sway over me, and I got into the groove with him on this thing, he says, tell people to stop saying it's fear porn and start calling it a warning. That's it. It's a warning.
Yeah. That's the basic message of Fatima too, is a call to repentance and conversion. Come back to the basics. I agree with you. But what can we do outside of praying for those who still think this is all a big joke? As these events get worse and worse, and I have no doubts, even over the next few weeks or months, we'll probably be seeing 8.0 earthquakes, maybe on a more regular basis. As a matter of fact, I took a look at some of the latest earth change news, and we had today in Japan a couple earthquakes over 5.0. Actually, Japan had a 6.0. A lot of them teetering over 5.0 now, which is a number that I use as a barometer. Then, of course, we've had we talked about the San Andreas fault. Well, scientists say it's locked, loaded, and ready to roll, which is never a good sign. And a lot of this is even coming from the mainstream, which is even scarier because we know how they censor, right, Steve?
Right. Right on, they do. They censor us very hard, Eric.
And then also today, the governor of West Virginia declared a state of emergency. West Virginia in certain areas are just flooding and underwater. We have, of course, maybe you want to talk about the meteorite trend. Now, this is what my kind of take on this is. Eventually, Planet X will kick in a comet or an asteroid, which has been talked about in Catholic prophecy, which will flood out certain areas. But it seems to me, even the data suggests that there's a lot more of these meteorites coming into our atmosphere.
Right. We saw this in February, Eric. We saw this, and in fact, I took so much grief when I put this video up, and I always have some kind of a tongue-in-cheek, catchy thing to get people to look and just check it out, right? And that one was that day. I actually caught on Soho a huge explosion on Jupiter.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Excuse me. So I put it up, and I got so much blowback. Like, you're an idiot. How Jupiter doesn't explode? And I was just being tongue-in-cheek, but I thought I saw something happen on Jupiter. Lo and behold, a couple days later, an amateur astronomer comes out and shows that Jupiter got hit multiple times. The reason I'm mentioning this is because I think that that's the asteroid field was passing by.
I agree with you. Yeah.
Jupiter at that point in time, and that's what's heading towards us.
Yeah, and that's not going to be pretty.
Yeah. That's what I think. Yeah.
I completely agree with you. It'll be like that movie 2012. I actually think 2012, that movie, is a little bit of an undersell because it doesn't go into the whole CME kill shot, what we would call chastisement, and also didn't cover the 3 days of darkness. But just to get some more recent news, an apocalyptic end of the world, they're calling it. A tornado passed through China, killing 80 yesterday. More volcanoes. I think it's over 40 or 50 now are going off. Then yesterday, a small swarm of 6 earthquakes hit Yellowstone again. Now, if I'm mistaken, that's twice a swarm has hit in that area. Is there any data on your end or analysis on your end to suggest that this thing might pop off soon, or is that still a little too early to tell?
It's too early to tell because remember, Yellowstone's made it through this before if you follow the 3,600-year cycle without blowing.
Okay. So, yeah, okay. That's what Marshall...
I think that Yellowstone is somewhat of a distraction. We're all looking at Yellowstone, freaking out about Yellowstone, and at the same time, I've got unexplainable lightning killing people in Pakistan, Germany, Italy, right?
Yeah, India too, yeah.
In India, right. That's where the big story was, where many, like a couple dozen people were killed by random lightning. And see, it's just going to keep going and going and get worse and worse. I'm sorry, that's what I think is going to happen.
Yeah, strange weather. I know John Moore, I was listening to you, he says, you probably could expect 200-mile-an-hour windstorms. We had, in the past few days, even heavy snow in Australia, heavy snow in Hawaii. Ladies and gentlemen, that's not normal. I mean, people need to understand that the weather is changing, and these are signs.
And these would be the things, Eric, that we'd expect. Again, I'm not even claiming I'm not even going to, right now I'm not going to claim, let's just put all the WSO photographic evidence to the side for a second. If you're not noticing that the sun is too far north right now, that one thing alone should be enough to kind of, knock you straight a little, okay? It's not normal for the sun to set at the summer solstice at 350 degrees north. It's just not. It's 17 degrees off, period. There's no other way to discuss it. So why is it 17 degrees off, Eric?
Yeah.
Because we're being pulled by our North Pole towards it.
Pole shift, yeah.
And the pole shift. Now, I have a thought on the pole shift, too, because they want us to believe that this pole shift phenomenon is a natural phenomenon that just happens, randomly. That's the way we were taught in science and college science, things like that, I remember, right? So, yeah, pole shifts happen. They happen every 680,000 years or whatever. It's just a natural phenomenon to the Earth, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, so that would make a really nice cover story, actually, for what's really happening, which is we're going to get turned around like a bobber on a line, okay? And as this thing got closer, our North Pole kept going towards it, more towards it, more towards it. And you see that trend over since 1860 when they were tracking it. You can see that movement has accelerated over time. And every theory they have belies the laws of thermodynamics. Mine doesn't. For every force, there's an opposite force, right? So it will continue. We would continue in this north-south alignment unless something from the outside affected it. That's what thermodynamics tells us, okay? We don't just change because we change. Something outside has to affect it. Think about what I'm saying. They already know the poles flip. Why would they flip? Because they've been affected by some external source. So again, it's like this dumbing down of everybody not to ask questions too. That's what bothers me, Eric.
Yeah.
When was it illegal for us to question NASA? When did it become illegal for me to question my government? When did that become illegal?
Welcome to the New World Order.
Right? I mean, I remember in America where you could say, we were taught that we could say and stand up for whatever we believed in our conscience. That's what I was raised on. That's what my church told me. That's what my parents told me. That's what my school told me. And then when I demand that level of value in my government that I was raised to expect, and then I find out that they're a hollow, dirty, rotten serpent, right? It's time for us to take it back, man. I'm done with it. I want my country back. I do care about all these birth events, but if we get a chance to take our country back through this process and get back to the republic that I thought was a great vision for our country, I want it back. Don't you?
Yeah, I mean, from a traditional Catholic point of view, we would be looking for, some even greater changes in what's already been written into our Constitution. I don't want to get too theological on this, but yeah, I mean, a lot of our country has been based in Freemasonic concepts, which are not necessarily great. I mean, some of the obviously some of the basics there, of course, are good, and that's actually one of the next things I wanted to talk to you about was the whole gun grab and how the NWO is coming after guns, and it seems like what I've kind of termed Orlando as kind of the new gay Holocaust, where many of us believe that was actually a hoax. There's been a lot of us to come out and do the research and suggest that this thing really it didn't go down as it said. As a matter of fact,
who was holding the door shut? Who was shooting the other bullets that the patrons of the bar were talking about? It's just like every one of these things, like 9/11 is an example. How come nobody goes back to the eyewitnesses and say, what do you remember happening that day? I remember explosions going up and down that building and it going down in a controlled demolition. They still remember this stuff. Why aren't we talking to the real patrons that heard it and saw it, right? Do you notice that? There's not a lot of that going on. You get one or two interviews, right? But not yes, let me tell you what happened. These 4 doors were closed and then somebody locked them from the outside and they were shooting from all directions. That's the story I got. Isn't it the story you got?
Yeah, there's a lot of conflicting information. As a matter of fact, I posted it yesterday on some of my social media. One of the ladies, I have no doubt, was a crisis actor. It was a lady with the glasses. I don't recall her name, but someone did a really good job. The video's going viral now, but they zoomed in on her glasses very closely, and I could even send you this video, but you can actually see in her glasses a reflection of her being in a green room, like it's staged, like like it's actually being propped up and staged to where she's not even standing in real life in the area that it says that she's in. So I'm like, really? I mean, to me, she was a crisis actor. And by the way, crisis actor is not a conspiracy theory. You can go and look that up. There was one lady who's been in the Paris one, the Brussels one, the Boston one. People are paid and they go on, in mainstream media and they're making it seem like, this thing was a live event or it really happened. I mean,
let's back up to 9/11 because 9/11 is to me is the epitome of false flag events that's ever happened in the face of the earth.
Sure.
Okay. And I believe you agree with me. Do you know who the biggest 9/11 truther group is in the United States of America?
I don't. Go ahead.
The families of the fallen. The firefighters and the people that lost lives in the buildings and the airplanes, that is almost 90% of them believe that it was an inside job and they want the truth to come out. Why doesn't that tell you anything, America?
Yeah.
Why would the families that actually lost loved ones feel that way? Even after they've gotten settlements, even after they were paid off, basically. Remember how they set up this big fund and they just paid everybody a couple $1 million hoping that they'd shut up? Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Nobody wants to talk about this stuff, man.
Yeah, Christopher Boylan, a great traditional Catholic, has exposed this beyond a shadow of doubt that it certainly was a false flag. And by the way, be prepared for more of them. Maybe you talked to Bob Fletcher, but I spoke with him for about 2 hours within this past year or two. And he was talking all his inside information. He said that they got on record to where they're going to try to pull off 6 9/11 events over the course of 2 weeks. And we all remember how traumatic, that was, that one event, that one day. Can you imagine 6 9/11 events happening over the course of a week or two? What kind of paranoia this country would be under?
Yeah, and that's why I think what's so important, what you're doing, and I'm trying to do too, Eric, and that is so that we aren't so easy. I want it to be, my vision, my hope is that we're not so easily manipulated. And I was manipulated in 9/11. I remember wanting to go to war. I remember wanting blood. Listen, man, if you're saying that you didn't feel that way during 9/11, then you're lying to me. Because I remember everybody around me was like that. Okay?
That's what they want.
They tapped into our anger in a way no other ever did.
Yeah.
So maybe Pearl Harbor tapped into it more, but the anger that we felt as a country gave them, and they predicted it, man. These Luciferians predicted all of this stuff, okay, and have been setting this stuff into motion for years and years, where we didn't even know they were doing it, and now we're starting to wake up to it, right? Well, the people in Britain woke up to it and they said, "We're done." They did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good for them.
Tell us.
I'm afraid that it's too little, too late right now, Rick. I think that we're almost to the precipice of the event now.
Yeah, we're definitely closing in on. Oh, it's just, I pray for those who are just kind of doing the 9 to 5, coming home, not really paying attention to these things, watching too much TV, not looking into this, because it's gonna be frightful. I mean, some of these events that have been described, via just either prophecy or that's in scripture. I wanted to get your take specifically on Planet X's effect on the sun. I've had Ben Davidson on, who doesn't come from the religious point of view. He's got a YouTube channel called Suspicious Observers, and it's highly recommended by scientists. I mean, most of his information comes from hardline scientists and et cetera, et cetera. He's got like 300,000 followers. And I proposed all of this stuff, coming at it from a different angle, and he says, yes, that's not out of the realm of possibility, such as the CME kill shot that we've been talking about. What's your your research on the whole CME kill shot, Planet X's effect on the sun, some things that we could be looking for?
I agree. Ben is a great resource for understanding the electric universe and all those types of things. So yes, the CME, right? So on April 22nd and 23rd, if you did not hear about this, we lost magnetosphere. In other words, for a short period of time, we had no magnetosphere because there was an opposing solar wind. And it was documented by BP Earthwatch's channel, okay? NASA takes the data down, says it was a broken satellite, etc. But here's why that's important. Our magnetosphere, we know, has gotten weaker, but when that opposing force of that other star, the dwarf star, which I believe that's where that solar wind came from, when we get caught between the sun or between the magnetic fields of the sun and this other system, it's going to wreak havoc on our magnetic field. And if it was a normal day and there was nothing going on in the universe, we can take X flares, we can take bursts, we can take that stuff all day long. But think about it. If we would have had a CME on 4/23, on April 23rd, 22nd, when BP showed that the magnetosphere was down, no protection, what happens is the positive ions will overcharge the atmosphere. They can't get out, and that creates earthquakes. That's what Ben will tell you, okay? So you can get earthquake effect if the Earth's, and I know it sounds funny, but if we lose our magnetosphere, it makes us more prone to earthquakes.
Yeah.
So that is the one effect. And then if you remember back in the 1860s, they talk about that event all the time. What was the name of that thing when we got hit by a CME and it fried all the telegraph poles?
Yeah, I think it was in Canada. It took out a certain portion, and obviously using that smaller scale, if it happened on a larger scale, Ben basically said, I mean, you're done for a couple decades.
Yeah, and again, and Ben is very, very has delved into this so deeply. I've learned most of what I know from Ben, right? And the bottom line is that's a scary thing when the magnetosphere is off, you guys, is what I'm trying to tell you. And when you don't have it, it's like you went from being inside during a 200 mile an hour hurricane storm to being right out in it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way you might want to think about it. So that magnetic shield is shielding us from a lot of things that people don't consider, that are beyond just the heat and the fire and things like that can happen. Like I said, earthquake potential goes up because of the ion charges and all these things that Ben explains to us. CMEs are bad. They're bad, okay? They're just bad.
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, it seems that this fire from the heavens, as our lady said, will be far worse than whatever will happen during World War III. I think it's quite evident it'll be far more frightening in that sense to just literally see these things coming down from the sky and just burning.
Yeah, I think that's what the Bible. This is my opinion. This is what the Revelator was talking about. He said that that worm would actually fell into the earth. If you look at the way that the exegetize that, look at that a little bit closer in the Greek, what you learn is it really means it's going by us. And I believe that that is the, you're going to have this iron oxide dust, okay, highly conductive. You're going to have all kinds of electrical discharges going on because, remember, we're charged probably opposite of this system because they're coming at clockwise, we're counterclockwise, okay? And so there's all kinds of, electrical phenomenon that are going to happen. There's going to be discharges. There's going to be electrical arcs. There's going to be things like that from the planets, too, not just the star.
Yeah, that's something to consider that many don't. Very interesting, yeah.
It is, and we're very electrical and a very electrical planet. So, like I said, that you can see the link to the lightning, the weird lightning that we're seeing in India and all over the world. Quite frankly, is, to me, I think that's part of what's happening in the upper ionosphere. That we're already starting to see differences of potential between the different bodies, and they're getting close enough now where you're starting to see them strike a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with you. So we're about ready to close here. I want to just ask you a final question here. Again, I am with Steve Olson of WSO. We'll put all his information up in the description box. Hopefully we can get an update going down the road here over the next few months as events continue to pick up. My question, we touched about it a little bit in terms of preparation. I mean, how does your everyday person go about trying to explain to people in your own communities how and why to prepare? I know I've been trying to do that in my area. Obviously, people in my area know who I am. And I'll tell you, they're silently doing it, I think. They're no longer calling us or calling me, weirdo or freak or, he's a nut job. They're actually starting to follow a little bit more of the channel. But, I mean, talk about maybe skill sets, tangible assets. I mean, there's a lot of things that people don't, take into consideration during this, what I just call a transition, if you will.
Right. It is. And so one of the things we talk a lot about is think about what you're going to barter with. So let me give you an example. Right now, you can buy a 50-pound bag of rice and a 50-pound bag of beans for almost nothing. Right? You put that in a plastic container, right? And it's worth $3, maybe $2, right? Well, think about when there's no food. How much is that container going to be worth?
Yeah.
See what I'm saying? So start to think in terms of basic life essentials, tree of essentials, right? Air, followed by, water, followed by food. And look at that and say, what do you have to barter with or barter for to get that? And that's the kind of preparations you should be thinking about.
Now, would you agree with this statement? I've been saying this now for a while. I think we both agree that we could see martial law coming on the horizon, economic collapse. I've been saying this. It's not going to be good enough for just you to know and prepare. If your community's not prepared and they know you are prepared, guess who they're going to come after? You see what I'm saying? So the more people who are prepared in your community, the more there will be less likely to be violence, I guess is what I'm saying, or people lose their cool in their head. I mean, if you're doing it as a community, it seems like that transition through this, past the cashless society will be a lot. It'll be a lot less violent. Would you agree?
Yeah, I believe in the community concept so much that I started 192 local community groups.
Good.
So I believe in the community concept. I believe the way we get through it is as a community. The way this whole listen, just because of the scenario starts to unfold. Why do we assume everybody's going to turn into a murderous, virus, zombie man? You know what I mean? Where did that come from? This country's been through crises without us just going raving mad and killing each other. Okay? We can handle it. Be with your neighbors, right? Have a group locally that you know and trust. And then when it happens, be kind. Don't go pointing up in the sky. I told you so. I told you so. If you do that, man, I'm going to, Eric and I are going to come trip you and do something to you. You don't do that. What you do is you say, look, we have trained, we have prepared, we're ready to help you guys too, okay? And if you have that spirit of Christ in you as this thing evolves, you can't be a prepper in the traditional sense. You can't be the guy with, your AR-15s loaded everywhere ready to shoot anybody that tries to come towards your food supply. Put that crap out of your mind. That's not what has to happen. What can happen is a bunch of Christians, being Christian, can step up to the plate and be like Jesus and help everybody and try to make it a team effort, not an individual survival effort.
Well said. I mean, that's exactly what I've been saying. I write it about in my book, The Law of Selfless Love. I mean, that's how we have to look. And again, by the way, I'm not advocating you not have a gun for what, pretend.
No. I have weapons. We're not being stupid about it. Okay, we do need to defend ourselves because there could be marauders or people that do not share our love value, right? But at the end of the day, more people are going to respond better to the servant love attitude from the people that are prepared mentally and physically for this event. Okay? Now, you might want to consider something, and your audience might want to consider it too. Do you ever think that maybe God's letting you know a little bit early so you could be that person?
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do here, and I'm sure that's partly why you do what you do.
Yeah, I don't think he woke us up for nothing just so we could sit here and look at pictures together, guys. I really don't think that's why he woke us up.
Yeah, it's one thing to know about it, but then it's just as important for us to start to prepare and for us to be ready to do something about it. Leadership, really, I know our Lord's been grooming me for leadership for quite some time, whether it's been on a basketball court, athletic wise, whether it's going through formal business degrees and being out in the business world. I mean, the world is going to need leaders, and that's what I've told, Tim Kennedy, the UFC fighter, when I came on. He believes in all this stuff. People think it's a joke. I mean, I send him emails on a daily basis. EJ Snyder, who's on that Dual Survival show, I've had him on. He gets it. He understands, and so listen. We're not whack job conspiratorial. You'd be surprised how many celebs are following what I do, and they agree. They know it's coming, ladies and gentlemen. So we have to get out of this paradigm, if you will, out of the box, and quit labeling individuals such as myself and Steve Olson as conspiratorial freaks. Any final?
Oh, by the way, I need to apologize to everybody I called a conspiratorial freak prior to 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry that I said the things I said to you guys. I really am.
Yeah, investigate it. Look into, I'm not saying, even for the things I say, and I'm sure you say this, Steve, too, people have to go out, use their critical thinking skills, and start going out there investigating it for themselves. You're not going to get the truth from the mainstream. I'm not saying everything that I have said before in the past is infallible. It's not. And so you gotta start digging beneath the surface and thinking and educating yourself, getting yourself away from the dancing with the stars and going out to the clubs and partying. I mean, we're entering very serious times, and I don't see a whole lot of people arriving at that point of seriousness.
Yeah, but let's just pray that our communicating and talking about it, and hopefully awareness building will start to have an impact. I mean, I think we are having an impact, Eric. Don't get all down. I think that I'm also seeing, to counter that, I'm seeing this huge, like probably better than half of my subscribers are new to the concept and new to this and just have become awake. So, on the other hand, I would also like to encourage you by saying that what we're doing in the time and where we stand in this right now is really helping a lot of people to come to these conclusions that you're talking about. You know what I mean? So be encouraged, brother. You're doing a great job.
Oh yeah. I'm not concerned. Our whole thing is we want to be visible. We want to warn a lot of people, but I think ultimately, as you mentioned earlier, it's going to be kind of like in Noah's flood. I mean, people knew what the message was, but did they actually take it seriously? I mean, how many people survived? And when we look at, from our point of view, from Catholic prophecy point of view, it'll be well over 3/4, in my opinion, who are wiped out. I mean, from the 3 days of darkness event alone, 3/4 of humanity will be gone. But yeah, I mean, we are. I mean, hopefully those, some of these souls will get in heaven, of course. But that's the ultimate aim. So, without further ado, I'm going to let Steve go. I know he's busy. Get to his YouTube page, which is going to be under Steve Olson, his Facebook page, WSO. I'll put all this stuff in the description box so you can't miss it. And again, we look forward to having Steve back on in the months ahead with some of his latest information. And definitely keep me posted via email if you get anything major, Steve.
Well, we just became inside contacts, Eric, and I'm with you all the way, man. I'm here to serve.
Alrighty. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, stay safe and God bless. Excuse me, my throat. Stay safe and God bless. Welcome, Eagles, to another episode of Trad Cat Night Radio. I am Eric Ajewski, founder and owner of Trad Cat Night, the most viewed and followed traditional Catholic apostolate worldwide. This is also home to the new Crusade. Ladies and gentlemen, I have with me a very special guest today, Mr. Steve Olson. Now, Steve is the founding member of the WSO Wormwood System Observations YouTube channel. It has flourished within 6 months to 35,000 subscribers. Steve was a business IT executive prior to this particular ministry, working with Xerox, Miller Brewing Company, and a variety of other Forbes 500 businesses. He's a veteran of the United States Air Force, and he worked with some very high clearances, to say the least. So today we're talking about Planet X. We're talking about Earth changes. You know, this is a very dear topic to us, not only as traditional Catholics, but we have a wide following, of course, mainly who are not Catholics, who are following along, and they're seeing the same things. And it's not only is there scientific data there to prove that.
Was Marshall Masters, who, by the way, now is my friend, and many others that have written on the topic. And I saw all that stuff from 2012 and everything, and I said, you know what? I'm going to go outside and see if I can get a picture of it myself, right? So I got some welding glasses and I went outside. And sure enough, I see this bright second dot next to the sun. I freak out. I drive an hour away to go to be at a friend of mine who I know to be a very good astronomer. And I actually sent a copy of it to Bob Fletcher and freaked. And they all came back to me and said, no, Steve, that's just a lens flare. Even though we believe that, Planet X is inbound, we don't think that you got a visual of it yet. So I said, oh, okay. So I put it away and I thought, wow, you crazy boy. And I went back to my job. Lo and behold, though, about, 7-8 months ago, I watched everything I could. I looked at everything I could on Nibiru. But then all of a sudden I saw a picture that was convincing. A picture that was actually taken from one of the All Sky Cameras network around the world. And I went right to it. It was one in Australia. And Irkutsk or something like that, Australia, out in the outback. And it showed a almost perfect straight-on picture.
As we've had on Gil Broussard and Marshall Masters and others, people should just be able to see this with their own eyes now. As a matter of fact, this morning, Steve, I posted Hawkeye Davis, who does a pretty good job of covering the Earth change. I think his YouTube channel is something like 70,000 subscribers. And some very telling video there from the past month, and I posted it all over social media. And I had people who had never heard of Planet X before give the feedback of, oh boy, we're in big trouble. That was their immediate reaction. And so, yeah, I mean, this thing is inbound, and it's causing all kinds of chaos already. And so I'm going to hand it over to Steve so he can talk a little bit more about his background, how he got involved with Planet X, the research involved. And then, as always, we're just going to kind of just walk through this like a conversation. And I'm really looking forward to hear what Mr. Olson has to say. So, Steve?
Thank you for, first of all, thank you for having me on the show, Eric. I really appreciate it. I'm honored to be here. So just to answer your question, right, Planet X Nibiru was the furthest thing from my mind, possibly the furthest thing from my mind, not more than a year and a half ago. If somebody would have came up to me and said, Steve, there's a planetary system, a solar system heading towards our solar system, and that it's going to start causing a lot of Earth changes, I would have called the Mendota Mental Health Institution to ask for the people to come get them.
Yeah.
So Mendota is our local psychiatric hospital, by the way. That's why I use the euphemism. Anyway, so what happened was that changed it was actually, it's really funny. I made a commitment to my son, my youngest son, who's now 23. In that same time period, I said, you know what? I'm going to get off the mainstream media. I am going to, for 6 months, not watch TV, not watch ABC, NBC, not watch, you know what I mean? Just stay away from mainstream for a little while, right? Because he was being really critical of me, not opening my mind to, to the kind of the broader spectrum of alternative news and things like that. So sure, I'll keep an open mind. I went on, I started to listen to people like Joe Rogan, really enjoyed all kinds of reporting and news that I was really enjoying. And I stumbled across this thing, Nibiru, right? Nibiru, what is that? So I start looking around, and I'm very skeptical on the internet, right? And I pick up a couple of authors. One guy was Bob Fletcher, another one of a blue object with a red ring around it. I'm like, well, that doesn't really look right. So I started thinking about it a little bit. I said, you know what? I'm going to go look at, I'm going to see if there's anything in the South Pole that you can look at. Because it seems to me that it's further south, so I should look at a further southern camera. Lo and behold, I find the Australian South Pole Expedition camera. I pull it up, and I immediately see a huge triangle in the sky, clearly up in the atmosphere, a huge cloud triangle, a huge red cloud ring in the middle of the sky, and clearly some kind of a star or object in the middle of it. I sat there for maybe an hour where I couldn't speak. And then my wife came in and she goes, "What's wrong?" I said, I just confirmed the existence of this star system. I think I actually see the star. And so that one thing led to another, and I just decided to put a couple of my videos up on the YouTube channel. And I'm also a very spiritual person, having been raised Catholic. I was taught